It was a quiet, sunlit morning when the engines thundered into the small town of Maple Ridge, shattering the peace that usually hung over the lonely roadside diner. The rumble grew louder until the windows trembled and every head turned as a group of bikers pulled into the gravel lot, their black leather jackets reflecting the sharp light. Among them was their leader, Rex Malone, a man whose name carried weight far beyond the rumbling of his Harley. His presence commanded silence. He was the kind of man who looked carved from stone, with eyes that spoke of 1,000 miles of roads and regrets. People whispered stories about him. Some feared him, others respected him, but no one truly knew the man behind the scars and tattoos. If you believe that kindness can come from the most unexpected hearts, that everyone deserves a second chance, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, where real stories of compassion come alive. Inside the diner, the clinking of coffee cups faded as the bikers took their seats. The waitress, her name tag read Mara, moved quietly between tables, her smile polite but weary. She was young, maybe 30, with tired eyes that held the weight of too many sleepless nights. When she leaned forward to pour coffee, Rex noticed something beneath her attempt at cheer. A faint bruise near her jawline, half covered by foundation, the kind that no makeup could fully hide. It wasn't the first time he'd seen something like that. It stirred memories of his past, the kind of past that still haunted him when the nights grew too long. Mara worked in silence, keeping her eyes down. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a plate before him. Rex's gaze lingered, not with anger, but with concern. He didn't say a word, but inside something shifted, a quiet fury mixed with an ache he hadn't felt in years. He saw himself in her fear. Years ago, he'd lost someone he loved to the same kind of pain, the kind no one spoke about, the kind hidden behind closed doors. That memory had been buried under layers of roughness, but now standing before this bruised waitress, it clawed its way back to the surface. Outside, the sky turned gray, and the wind began to pick up dust from the lot. The other bikers laughed among themselves, but Rex wasn't listening. He watched as Mara slipped into the back kitchen, her shoulders slumped. He followed her with his eyes, noticing how she flinched when the manager barked an order from across the counter. The man was thick-set with a mean look and eyes that burned with quiet cruelty. And in that moment, everything became clear to Rex. Hours later, when the lunch crowd thinned, Rex lingered alone at the counter, pretending to sip the last of his coffee. He watched the manager walk past Mara, bumping her shoulder hard enough to make her spill. She whispered an apology, but the man's response was sharp, venomous. Rex's jaw tightened. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't just stress. It was fear, the kind that traps people in silence. That night, Rex couldn't shake the image of her bruises. He sat in his garage, the neon light flickering across rows of bikes, lost in thought. His brothers from the club came by, joking and loud, but he barely heard them. He kept thinking about how life had once given him a chance to help someone, and how he'd failed. He promised himself never again. The next morning he made up his mind. When the sun rose, Mara came into work early, her hair tied back neatly, trying once more to hide the mark on her cheek. She was surprised to see the bikers' motorcycles already lined up outside, their chrome catching the morning light. Rex sat at the counter waiting. When she approached, he asked softly if she was okay. She nodded quickly, too quickly, her smile trembling. But then, before she could turn away, he spoke again, not in anger, not in pity, but with a quiet firmness that told her he saw what others ignored. And in that silence, she broke. Tears welled up, spilling before she could stop them. The manager stormed out from the back, ready to shout. But Rex stood. The room fell still. The bikers behind him straightened, their presence heavy and solid. The manager's tone faltered as Rex walked toward him, not fast, but with a calm that made the man's arrogance crumble. Rex didn't raise his voice. He simply told the man that hurting someone weaker didn't make him powerful. It made him pitiful. The manager tried to protest, but one look at the dozen bikers behind Rex made him stop. He stormed out, cursing under his breath. His pride shattered as the door swung shut behind him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mara turned, her face streaked with tears, and whispered a thank you so faint it barely left her lips. Rex nodded and told her she didn't need to thank anyone, that she just needed to start again without fear. The diner erupted in quiet murmurs. People who had watched in silence earlier now looked ashamed of their inaction. One old man even stood to clap softly, and slowly others joined until the sound filled the small space like a heartbeat. The story of what happened spread through Maple Ridge by nightfall. The men who had once been feared became a symbol of unexpected kindness. People began to see the bikers differently, less as outlaws and more as protectors. Mara left her job at the diner and found work at a small cafe across town where the owner treated her with respect. Sometimes Rex would stop by for coffee, not as a savior, but as a friend checking in. Each time she smiled, now it reached her eyes. But the most surprising part wasn't what Rex did that day. It was how it changed him. For years, he'd lived behind walls built from guilt and loss. Helping her broke something open. It reminded him that even the toughest hearts could still heal others. His club brothers noticed the change too. They began organizing charity rides for women's shelters, food drives, and community work. What started as a single act of courage turned into a movement that softened an entire town's perception of them. One evening, months later, as the sun set over Maple Ridge, Mara stood outside the diner, now under new management, and saw a familiar line of motorcycles pass by. The leader raised a hand as he rode past, a quiet acknowledgement, a bond formed not by words, but by shared humanity. She smiled, her heart full, knowing that sometimes kindness doesn't come wrapped in gentle hands. It comes roaring in on two wheels, wearing leather, and a heart that has known pain. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that real strength lies in compassion, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, where we celebrate the goodness that still exists in this world. Before you go, comment below. Do you believe even the toughest people can have the softest hearts? And as the last light faded behind the mountains, Maple Ridge remembered that day, not for the roar of engines, but for the silence that followed, when kindness finally spoke louder than fear,